Greetings. My name is Gray Andrus, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker in the Kansas City metro area. I am licensed on both sides of the state, Kansas and Missouri. In addition, I am an assistant professor at Missouri Western in our BSW program. We are about 50 miles north of Kansas City. Welcome to part one of a two-part Diagnostics 1 hour CEU. Um, As a social worker, I've worked with kids in and out of the child welfare system since 1986, which has included residential care, psychiatric, inpatient psychiatric, and community-based services, including private practice, a lot of in-home work. Um, so that's my background, work primarily with kids and families. So we're going to look at shared decision making as a tool of empowerment, and we're going to explore the diagnostics with a couple case presentations in parts one and part two. So thank you so much for joining me. When you're completed part two, follow the instructions. It's pretty simple. Please download the evaluation, complete that, and send the evaluation and a one-page reflection paper on what this workshop stood out for you. What was something that you learned? What was something that was new to you or was old to you, but you really appreciated? And we look forward to your feedback. We'll in turn send you a certificate for one free CEU. So here we go, shared decision making. So the role of the social worker is not to be the expert, but to be a collaborator, someone who works with the client. We meet them at their level of functioning. We get down in the ditch with them, help them figure out a way to get out of that ditch that they maybe got themselves into. So let's start with a case. This is a case I consulted on in clinical supervision many years ago. 34-year-old woman presents at a hospital. She states she is suicidal and homicidal. She shares with you that she lives in a group home and does not want to go back. And she reports that she left the group home about 3 days ago, and she's been on the streets. So if you have a client that lives in a group home, there's going to be a couple things that pop into your head. Maybe number one, does she have a guardian? Who's her guardian? Maybe number two, where's her family? These would be things that might pop into her head. And number three, she maybe has a disability. How did we get in a group home? So we reach out to the guardian ad litem, and the guardian ad litem says, hey, she hadn't really been on the streets for 3 days. She left the group home after throwing a big fit and has tried to get herself hospitalized for the last 3 days at a couple other hospitals, but has been unsuccessful. So you all are her third stop. And she does have some sort of developmental disability. And as I mentioned, where are her people, her connections, her resources, her family? So why doesn't she want to go back to the group home? She states to you that they're killing her. And you say, really? Tell me more about that. They're not feeding me. Well, that sounds pretty alarming, as you can imagine. She says, if they don't feed me, I'm going to attack them with a chair. I'm going to hit them with a chair. The group home reports that they are helping her watch her nutrition. She has gained some weight recently, and that it was decided to put her on a diet. The guardian ad litem says she has to go back. The guardian ad litem is not interested in talking to her. There are no other options. If you all don't hospitalize her, she needs to go back to the group home. But one of the things that pops to your attention, right, is was she a part of this decision? Did the group home put her on a diet, or was she a part of this process? As you explore this a little bit more in detail with the client, you find she was not a part of the process. She went to bed one night, woke up the next day. There were no seconds. Snacks were celery and carrots. She had to eat all of her food before dessert. There were no seconds on dessert. and she identified that they're trying to kill her. Well, for a lot of people, eating is a huge part of our social functioning. It's where we meet with our kids and ask them how their day was. It's where we meet a best friends at a restaurant and we socialize and we laugh. Well, what if for her that's the best part of her day? And now we've just made it the worst part of her day. So how could we help if we were the social worker? Where would you begin on this case? Does this client feel powerless or empowered? And in this instance, I think she's both. The opposite of being powerless is to be powerful. And she is feeling powerful by making threatening statements. If they don't feed me, I'm going to hit them with a chair. She's looking for somebody to take care of her and defeat her. So she's using power in a negative way. The group home is in a power struggle with her. Do you know about power struggles? I would imagine you do. Having worked with kids for a long time, there are some power struggles I never wanted to get into. Cursing. If I told a client not to curse, they would just curse under their breath. Peeing and pooping, sex, masturbation. Well, that's an area I never wanted to go down. Eating. Man, if you told someone they couldn't eat, they'd steal food. So why are we engaging in a power struggle? And when we think about power struggles, we should think always about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Where do these needs, right, of peeing and pooping and eating and cursing, where do they connect on Maslow's hierarchy? Yep, they're right down there at the bottom. They're at the base. We have physiological needs to eat. We have a desire, right, to belong and to be connected. So why are we creating a power struggle with a developmentally delayed adult client at the very base of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? How is that a win-win situation? So why would an agency, why would anyone ever get into a power struggle over a basic need? Doesn't seem like rocket science, does it? What it amounts to is that this client was not included in the decision. She wasn't engaged. There was no buy in for her to reduce her calorie intake. She just took it as they were trying to kill her. So when we look at shared decision making as an empowering tool, and we look at the diagnostics, we have to think about the research by Scott Miller and Barry Duncan. Two researchers, they both have worked together. They've created a best practice model called feedback informed treatment. Although the two no longer work together, the model feedback informed treatment was identified as an evidence based practice prior to some of the changes in SAMHSA and the National Registry of Evidence Based Practices. So Miller and Duncan say we need to look at the pre-existing beliefs about the problem and their theory of change. Every client has their own lens of how they see the world. It drives how they think, how they feel, and how they behave. And all of that is glued together by their lens. What's your lens? I'm a social worker. I'm a husband, 32 years. I'm a father, 4 sons, 3 biological sons, and 1 boy my wife and I fostered. All 4 of my sons are Eagle Scouts. I'm an Eagle Scout. I'm Catholic. I'm Caucasian. I grew up in the Midwest. All of these things have been a part of my lens and helped me drive the way I see the world. Well, how do our clients see the world? We have to take time to really understand their lens and their theory of change. So, taking Miller and Duncan's theory of change and analysts, and we break it down, we should explore the client's ideas about the cause of the problem. Frequently, people have an opinion of what's causing the problem or what even may be a potential solution. They may have some hunches. They maybe have had this problem before. Again, they are the expert of their lives. I'm not an expert of anyone else's lives. I want to explore the client's usual methods of change. How does change usually occur in their life? What role do they have in change? What role do others have in change? What events usually precede or follow change when change occurs? Is change first order change, which is more or less, or is change second order change, which is more permanent change? I want to explore the ways the client has attempted to solve the problem. What have you done so far? Has it kind of worked, even a little bit? What attempts have you taken? Why have your attempts been slightly successful, or why have they not worked at all? When I would take a new client when I was doing therapy in full time, I would always ask them about their therapy history. Have you been in therapy before? If so, did it work? If so, was it helpful? If it was helpful and it worked, why aren't you with that therapist? Why are you coming to me? There's a great likelihood I could really mess things up because I'm probably not like that therapist. So I want to explore people's theory of change and how they see the world. What's their lens? So I want to honor their theory of change, not my theory of change. I don't want to be on the back end of this elephant. That's not really the best place to be. Can you imagine being back there? Oh, not a good place. So, in wrapping up Miller and Duncan's work, I want to honor the client's theory of change. I want to I want to sit down and explore with them. I want to listen for change talk when I explore with them, when I take a social history. I want to help the client be a part of this contribution to change. I want to help them access their strengths and even use their stretches as strengths. So let's look at a case. Parents go to a parent teacher conference. The teacher shares they're really concerned about this student's inability to concentrate. The teacher says to the parents, I think you should have your child assessed for ADD and maybe get on medication. So the parents walk out of that parent teacher conference believing that their child has ADD. Again, this case example isn't very far fetched. This happens more often than you can even imagine. But is it really ADD? Concentration we see with kids in many other areas. Here are 6 additional possibilities. Number 1, acute stress disorder. We see problems of concentration. Generalized anxiety disorder, difficulty concentrating, mind going blank, racing thoughts. Major depressive disorder, a diminished ability to concentrate, indecisiveness, maybe every day. How about an adjustment disorder? We'll see decreased performances at school. Pretty common. How about post-traumatic stress disorder? Subpoint E number 5 says problems with concentration from the diagnostic manual. How about persistent depressive disorder, what we used to call dysthymia? Poor concentration or difficulty making decisions. So when I sit down with this child who has ADD, according to a teacher, I want to sit down and really explore because just knowing the symptoms isn't enough. In order to rule out, to really figure out what the problem is, I have to help my client share with me, right? They are the expert of their child. I need to seek to understand. So frequently in cases like this, I would ask questions like this. So what does your son or daughter do when they're home? Do they like puzzles? Do they like to color? Do they play Legos? If they have a history of working a puzzle for an hour when they get home from school, or they'll play Legos for 2 hours before bedtime, is that ADD? ADD is all day long. It's not just when you're at school. The teacher may see that inattentiveness, but the inattentiveness has to be across the board. If it's not across the board, then we've ruled out ADD and we're looking at something else. So, in order to do that, it isn't just based on the symptoms. We have to, using shared decision making, right? Feedback informed, we have to understand from the client's point of view their theory of change. So, Shared decision-making isn't a new concept. It's been around for a long time, and all of you probably participate in it, and maybe you don't even give it a second notice. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, "Hey, Gray, I think you need to be on some cholesterol medicine." And you say, "Whoa, wait a minute, doctor. Before you put me on meds, I'd kind of like to go to the gym and see if I can lose some weight and, reduce my cholesterol a natural way." So the doctor says, "Okay, we'll give that a 6-month try. Then I want you back here in the office." What if you sit down with an attorney to discuss divorce and you don't like their position? You get a different attorney. What if you having a problem with your dishwasher, so you get a bid out to fix your dishwasher or to paint your house? We're a part of that shared decision making, whether it's our health care or the maintenance on our home or getting our car repaired or buying a car or buying a cell phone all the time, but not so much in child welfare. There's this default position called adult centrism. That research was identified by Dr. Chris Petter, now retired. He was the director of the PhD program at the Kansas School of Social Work. It's a default position that we are the experts of the client. We know what's best for the client. The Ann Casey Foundation published a paper in 2014 looking at team decision making from a shared decision making process. They look at the history. They've identified that shared decision making and team decision making in child welfare has been around since the 1980s, except, this is interesting, Kansas only began using it as a best practice model in the fall of 2019. Missouri has been using it or attempting to use it for over a dozen years with some success, but both states continue to fail their federal guidelines for child welfare um, responsibilities. So Ann Casey has a goal, and their goal is that shared decision making, team decision making, be listed on the healthy blueprints to be identified as a best practice resource. And taking a couple snapshots out of their paper, which you can find if you Google Ann Casey Foundation Team Decision Making, the director in the Denver County Human Service area said, there has for a long time been this, it's my case, it's my call mentality in child welfare. So I'd get a case, I'd make a plan, I'd go to the family, I'd say, here's the plan, and then roll it out. The problem is that the family never engaged in the process. It wasn't their plan. I didn't take time to really understand their theory of change or their lens on how they see the world or what's best for the family. So shared decision making is empowerment. It is empowering. And we use it, or should be using it, in our diagnostic impressions and our clinical considerations all the time. Thank you so much for joining me on part one. When you've finished part one, please take a moment, jump on into part two. I broke this up to see if it's easier for the clinician to get an hour CEU by breaking it up into two sections. Let me know if that was helpful. Also, there are other CEU opportunities on this webpage, including the ethics of integrity. So please join my co-presenter as we explore ethics, but that is a one giant chunk CEU. After watching part one and part two, please complete the survey and email us a short one-page reflective paper on what was meaningful to you or what stood out to you or what did we leave out or what's your thoughts about shared decision-making and empowerment theory. All of the CEUs are supported by the Missouri Western School of Social Work. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you over on part two.